There is a memory someone has tried to bury 1,000 times, yet every quiet night it returns with even greater force. It was not because of what you said, nor because of what you did afterward. It was because they saw you during a moment when you believed no one was watching, a moment so raw, so honest, and so painfully human that it changed the way they saw you forever. They expected confidence, certainty, and perfect control, but instead they witnessed your struggle. Oddly enough, that single unforgettable night became the reason they have never been able to erase you from their heart. Stay until the end, because the truth behind that moment is far deeper than anyone realizes, and every second brings you closer to the hidden reason they still think about you today. There is one detail they have never shared with another soul. While everyone else would have looked away or forgotten what happened by morning, they couldn't. They replayed that night over and over, searching for an explanation that never came. They kept asking themselves why your face remained in their thoughts long after everything was over. The answer frightened them because it had nothing to do with appearances or first impressions. It was the quiet strength hidden inside your vulnerable moment that stayed with them. They realized they had witnessed something incredibly rare. Someone refusing to give up even when life seemed determined to push them down. Don't skip, because what happened after they walked away became even harder for them to understand. Days passed, yet something inside them refused to move on. Every familiar place reminded them of that evening. Every unexpected silence carried them back to the exact second they saw you standing there, unaware that someone's entire perspective was changing forever. They began noticing strange coincidences that always seemed to lead back to thoughts of you. The more they tried to distract themselves, the clearer your memory became. They even convinced themselves it would eventually disappear, but instead it only grew stronger. What they don't want you to know is that the image they remember isn't one of weakness, it is the beginning of a story they secretly believe was never meant to end. Tonight that memory feels closer than ever before. Something has shifted inside them, and they can no longer pretend that unforgettable night meant nothing. They now understand that what looked like an unfortunate moment was actually the first chapter of a connection neither of you expected. The truth they have been hiding is almost impossible to carry any longer, because every passing day makes them wonder what would have happened if they had spoken to you before walking away. That unanswered question has become heavier than silence itself. Stay with this message, because what they finally realize next changes everything you thought that unforgettable night truly meant. A strange silence has been growing inside them, and it has become impossible to ignore. Every time they try to convince themselves that night was meaningless, another memory rises and proves them wrong. They remember the expression on your face more clearly than the place where it happened. They remember how the world around you seemed to disappear while you carried a weight no one else could see. That silent image has become the one memory they cannot replace, no matter how hard they try. Stay until the end, because the truth they discovered afterward completely changed the story they had been telling themselves. What they never admitted is that witnessing your lowest moment also revealed something about themselves. They realized they had spent years judging people by appearances, never expecting genuine strength to hide behind quiet struggles. But you shattered that belief without saying a single word. Since then, every conversation, every new face, and every ordinary day has been measured against the memory of you. Nothing has ever felt quite the same again. They keep wondering if fate allowed them to see that moment for a reason, because some memories refuse to fade unless they carry a purpose much greater than anyone understands. The hardest part for them is pretending nothing changed. Outwardly, life continued as usual, but inside, they kept replaying every tiny detail, searching for something they had missed. They even questioned whether they should have walked back, spoken to you, or simply let you know that someone had quietly believed in you from that very night. Instead, they chose silence, and that silence has slowly become heavier than words. Every passing day makes them wonder whether that single decision changed both of your paths forever. Don't skip, because the next realization is the one they have feared the most. Now they have reached a point where running from that memory no longer works. They understand that unforgettable night was never about seeing someone at their weakest, it was about witnessing a courage that most people never notice. That realization has followed them through every season, waiting for the perfect moment to surface again. And tonight, for reasons they cannot fully explain, it feels as though everything is leading them back toward you. The message they have been hiding is closer than ever to being revealed, and once it comes into the light, nothing between your stories will feel ordinary again. Everything changed the moment they stopped asking, "Why can't I forget that night?" and started asking a far more unsettling question: why did I have to be there at that exact moment? That single thought refused to leave them alone. They began realizing how impossible the timing truly was. Out of every place they could have been, out of every path they could have taken, they ended up witnessing the one moment that revealed the side of you no one else ever saw. The more they reflected on it, the less it felt like an accident. Stay until the end, because the next realization is the one they have never had the courage to say aloud. They also noticed something that still gives them chills. Whenever life became overwhelming, their mind returned to that same memory instead of happier moments from their own past. It made no logical sense. They barely knew you, yet your quiet determination during that difficult moment became a source of unexpected strength for them. Without realizing it, they started making different choices because of what they had seen. They became more patient, more understanding, and less quick to judge others. You never knew it, but that one unforgettable night quietly transformed someone else's heart in ways they still struggle to explain. There is another truth they have hidden even from themselves. They have imagined meeting you again more times than they could ever count. In every version of that meeting, the first thing they want to say is not an apology or an explanation. They simply want you to know that the person they saw that night was far stronger than they appeared. They regret allowing silence to become the ending of a story that never truly had a chance to begin. Every missed opportunity has only made that regret heavier, and now it feels as though time itself is asking them to face what they have been avoiding. Tonight, that unforgettable memory no longer feels like a burden to them. It feels like an unfinished chapter waiting for its final sentence. Deep inside, they sense that the story cannot remain incomplete forever. The question they have carried for so long is finally demanding an answer, and they know they cannot ignore it much longer. What they are preparing to realize next is far greater than remembering a single night. It is the moment they finally understand why your presence has remained impossible to replace, even after all this time, and that truth is closer than ever to being revealed. A quiet realization has finally settled inside them, and it refuses to disappear. They no longer believe that unforgettable night was simply a memory trapped in the past. Instead, They see it as the beginning of a question that has followed them every single day since then. Every time they tried to convince themselves they had moved on, something small pulled them back, a familiar expression, a passing thought, or an unexpected silence that carried your memory with it. The more they resisted, the stronger it became. Stay until the end, because they are closer than ever to admitting the one truth they have hidden from everyone, including themselves. There is one detail they have never stopped replaying. It was not the place, nor the circumstances, but the way you carried yourself after everything happened. They expected disappointment to define you, yet they saw something completely different. Even in a difficult moment, there was a quiet determination that refused to disappear. That silent strength became impossible for them to forget. Long after that night ended, they kept wondering how someone could remain standing when life seemed determined to test them. The answer never came, and that mystery is exactly what has kept your memory alive inside their heart. As the months passed, they slowly understood something that surprised even them. The memory was never asking to be forgotten, it was asking to be understood. They realized they had been carrying unfinished words that were never spoken. If they had one chance to return to that night, they would not try to change what happened. They would simply tell you that you were never as alone as you believed. That single sentence has echoed in their thoughts countless times, yet it has never reached the person it was meant for. Don't skip, because the final piece of this story is beginning to reveal itself. Now they stand at the edge of a decision they can no longer delay. The silence that protected them for so long has become heavier than the truth itself. They understand that some memories stay alive because they are connected to something that has not yet reached its ending. That unforgettable night was never the conclusion of your story in their eyes, it was only the first page. And as everything begins to fall into place, they feel that the moment they have been avoiding for so long is finally approaching, bringing with it a revelation that could change the meaning of that night forever. There is something they have finally stopped denying. The memory that has followed them all this time was never about pity, sympathy, or curiosity. It became unforgettable because it revealed the real version of you before the world had a chance to hide it behind smiles and ordinary conversations. That single glimpse has stayed untouched by time. Every new experience they have had since then has somehow been compared to that one night, and every comparison has ended the same way. Nothing has ever carried the same quiet impact. Stay until the end, because the final truth has been waiting patiently for this exact moment. The closer they came to accepting their feelings, the more they noticed another strange pattern. Every attempt to leave the past behind somehow led them back to you. A random song, an unexpected place, or a familiar silence would suddenly bring everything rushing back. They stopped calling it coincidence because it happened too many times to ignore. It was as if life itself refused to let that memory disappear. Instead of fading, it kept growing stronger, reminding them that some moments are not meant to be forgotten, they are meant to be understood when the right time finally arrives. Then came the realization that changed everything. They were never haunted by what they saw. They were haunted by what they never did afterward. They never asked if you were all right. They never told you how deeply that moment affected them. They never admitted that your quiet courage became something they secretly admired. That silence has become the only part of the story they truly regret. If they could rewrite one chapter of their life, it would begin with turning around instead of walking away, because that single decision has echoed through every day since. And now, after carrying this hidden truth for so long, they know one thing with complete certainty. Some memories refuse to fade because they are still waiting for their ending. The night they saw you was never the end of your story in their heart, it was the beginning of one they never had the courage to continue. Today, that unfinished chapter feels closer to completion than ever before. The words they have kept locked away are finally ready to find their way into the light, and when they do, everything they have been silently carrying will finally make perfect sense. The truth they have avoided for so long has finally become impossible to outrun. They have reached the point where every attempt to silence that memory only makes it louder. It no longer feels like a scene from the past, it feels like an unfinished promise waiting for the right moment to be fulfilled. Every quiet evening reminds them of the exact expression they saw on your face, and every passing day convinces them that they misunderstood that night from the very beginning. Stay until the end, because the hidden meaning behind that moment is finally beginning to reveal itself. What they remember most is not the difficult position you were in. It is the way you refused to let that moment define who you were. They watched someone carrying invisible burdens while still finding the strength to keep moving forward. That image became a silent lesson they never expected to receive. Whenever they faced their own challenges, your memory returned like an unspoken reminder that real strength is rarely loud. It is quiet, patient, and often invisible to everyone except the person willing to truly see it. That is why they have never been able to replace the memory of you with anyone else. Then another realization arrived without warning. They finally understood that they were never searching for a chance to forget you. Deep inside, they had been searching for a chance to see you again. Every unexpected encounter with someone who looked similar, every familiar voice, and every place connected to that night awakened the same feeling of unfinished destiny. They wondered whether life would ever allow your paths to cross again, not because of curiosity, but because there were words left unsaid that had quietly grown heavier with every passing season. Don't skip, because what they are preparing to admit next changes everything they once believed. Now the silence between the past and the present is beginning to break. They no longer see that unforgettable night as a painful memory. They see it as the first sign that some people enter your life without warning and leave behind a mark that time cannot erase. The story they thought had ended never truly reached its conclusion. Instead, it has been patiently waiting for the moment when hidden feelings become impossible to hide any longer. And as that moment draws closer, they know one thing with absolute certainty: what began on that unforgettable night is finally moving toward the truth they have carried in silence all this time. The closer they come to the truth, the more one question refuses to leave their mind. What if that unforgettable night was never meant to be forgotten because it was only the beginning? They have replayed every second so many times that even the smallest details feel alive. The silence, the atmosphere, the expression on your face, none of it has faded. Instead, it has become clearer with time, almost as if the memory has been patiently waiting for this exact moment to reveal its real purpose. Stay until the end, because the secret they have carried is finally reaching the point where it can no longer remain hidden. For a long time, they believed they were protecting themselves by saying nothing. They convinced themselves that speaking up would only reopen an old chapter. But they were wrong. It was because of the quiet strength they witnessed in you, a strength that continued to inspire them long after you disappeared from sight. Then came the moment that changed everything inside them. They finally admitted that the memory had become far more than a memory. It had quietly turned into hope. Hope that one day they might cross paths with you again. Hope that they might finally tell you what they should have said from the beginning. Hope that you would understand they never saw you at your lowest, they saw someone refusing to let life take away their spirit. That realization filled them with both relief and regret, because they understood they had spent far too long hiding behind silence. Now they stand on the edge of a decision they cannot postpone any longer. The weight they have carried since that unforgettable night is becoming impossible to keep inside. They know that if they remain silent again, this question will follow them for the rest of their life. Something is beginning to shift, and they can feel it with every passing day. The next step they take will reveal whether that unforgettable night was simply a memory, or the first sign that two stories were always meant to meet again in a way neither of you could have imagined. A feeling they can no longer ignore has taken control of every quiet moment. They finally understand that the night they saw you was never the reason they couldn't move on. It was the beginning of a truth that kept growing in silence. Every time they tried to lock that memory away, it returned with greater clarity, as though it was waiting for the exact moment when they would finally be ready to accept what it meant. Stay until the end, because the final piece of this mystery is closer than ever before. They have stopped asking themselves whether you remember that night. Instead, they wonder whether you ever realized someone walked away carrying a memory that would quietly shape their future. You never knew that your silent resilience became a turning point in another person's life. Whenever they felt lost, they remembered how you refused to let one difficult moment define you. That memory became a source of courage they never expected to find. Without realizing it, you became part of a chapter they have never been able to close. Then an unexpected realization arrived. They understood that they had spent all this time searching for answers in the past when the real answer was waiting in the present. The memory was never asking to be explained. It was asking to be completed. There were words left unsaid, feelings left unspoken, and a connection left unfinished. The longer they remained silent, the stronger those unfinished emotions became. Don't skip, because what they are about to do next is something they once believed they would never have the courage to face. Now everything feels different. The fear that kept them silent has slowly been replaced by determination. They no longer want to wonder what might have happened if they had spoken to you that night. They want the chance to create a new memory that finally answers the question they have carried for so long. Deep inside, they believe some moments return to our hearts because they are preparing us for another beginning, not reminding us of an ending. And the next chapter of this story is about to reveal why that unforgettable night was only the first step towards something neither of you ever expected. The moment they feared has finally arrived. They can no longer convince themselves that the memory belongs to the past. It follows them into every quiet morning and every sleepless night, refusing to disappear. They have reached a point where forgetting is no longer an option because the truth hidden inside that unforgettable night has become stronger than their silence. The more they try to move forward, the more life seems determined to bring your memory back in unexpected ways. Stay until the end, because the realization waiting ahead is the one they never imagined they would have to face. There is something they have never admitted to anyone. After that night, they quietly began paying attention to people in a completely different way, hoping to find another soul with the same quiet resilience they saw in you. They searched without even realizing they were searching. Every smile reminded them that yours was different. Every conversation reminded them that yours had never even happened. That absence became louder than any words they could have exchanged. They finally understood that it wasn't the situation they remembered, it was the person standing inside it who had become impossible to replace. One unexpected thought changed everything. They asked themselves what would happen if fate placed you in front of them one more time. For the first time, they did not imagine walking away. They imagined stopping, smiling, and telling you that the night you thought no one truly noticed you became the very night someone began seeing life differently. They realized they had carried gratitude disguised as regret for far too long. Don't skip, because the next decision they make could finally end the silence that has followed both of your stories. Now they feel as though the distance between memory and reality is becoming smaller with every passing day. The fear that once kept them silent has slowly disappeared, replaced by a quiet certainty that unfinished stories rarely remain unfinished forever. They no longer believe that unforgettable night was a coincidence. They believe it was the beginning of something that simply needed time before its meaning could be understood. And just when they think they have finally accepted the past, a new chapter begins to open, one that promises to reveal why that single night has refused to let either heart truly move on.